And it looks like we are live. And it says we've been live for 26 seconds, which I know it's only been like 10 since I hit the button. But whatever. Hello, everyone. This is My Two Cents. Welcome to my channel. Over the past couple days, I have had a lot of people messaging me saying, when are you going to make a video about the economic collapse? When are you going to make a video and the coronavirus and everything that's going on? And honestly, as we've just been discussing before getting started here, there has been so much going on in the news cycle. It's been difficult to keep up with it all. So I figured it would be a lot easier just kind of have a meeting of the minds here, bring together some of my closest friends here in the ANCAP community and discuss all these things at once. So basically, if you haven't been living under a rock, I'm sure you're aware that the entire world is panicking over the coronavirus, and every major news media outlet is teaching you that we had a very strong economy, everything was great, but then unfortunately the coronavirus hit, and now the stock market is plunging. Because of lack of production, lack of transportation, resulting from people being infected with the coronavirus and efforts to control the coronavirus. Now, it's not that there's no truth to that, but there certainly is a lot more going on. And Filthy Heretic, hello, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, sorry for being late.
No problem. But I guess the question before us is, what really is going on? Obviously, it's certainly true the coronavirus plays a role in this, but is it the case that we had the strongest economy in the world and it's just been put a damper on because of the coronavirus? Or is it, as I and others have been saying for years, our economy is in a bubble? It's been in a bubble for a very long time and has just been waiting for the proper pin to prick it, if you will. And the coronavirus turns out to be that pin. So I'm going to put it out there. If anybody wants to open up quick, has anything they really want to say, opening up quick.
I just wanted to say really quick. Well, we can debunk the coronavirus narrative being, the explanation for what's currently going on in the economy right now by pointing to one simple thing: the fact that the Federal Reserve is going to cut interest rates to 0 this week, but has been cutting interest rates every week for the last month here. It's to the point where the current interest rate, I think, is like 0.25%, like just barely above 0.
Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that's important to point out, and I've talked about this on several of my past live streams as well and podcasts, is that Donald Trump, prior to taking office, very openly criticized Obama and the Fed for quantitative easing and saying it was a dumb economic policy, which of course was a true statement. But then as soon as he takes office, he suddenly reverses course. And you can look it up. You can find in his tweet history all the times he's tweeted out demanding that the Fed conduct more quantitative easing, because this is very important, all the while claiming that we have the strongest economy in the world and that it's all thanks to his leadership. And
so
go ahead.
Okay, well, just what I was going to say, though, is we know that the sort of the mockingbird explanation for what's causing the current economic collapse can't be true, because if we were to accept that explanation that, we just need the Fed to manipulate interest rates to stimulate productivity, well, that's what they're doing. So what we're in right now is a situation where either they can raise rates and that'll cause, that'll collapse the entire economy, because the only thing keeping it afloat at this point is, the manipulations is just keeping the lights on a couple, another minute or so.
And on that note,
essentially what the situation we're in is one of stagflation, and that's what I love about this current depression. Like that may not be the right choice of words to say that I love the fact that there's a depression, but I love that any narrative which argues for the state to intervene more is dead in the water now, because the existence of stagflation is the bane to the presence of stagflation, is the bane to the existence of the mainstream economists as it pertains to the concept of interest rates.
And I was just gonna add quick. So then, when Trump took office back in 2016 and moving into early 2017, I remember Business Insider, Forbes, some of these other mainstream financial publications saying that now that Donald Trump has taken office, we can expect the Fed to begin attempting to normalize interest rates. During Obama's whole thing was stimulating the economy by cutting interest rates. Now that Trump's in office, we can expect interest rates will rise and they will normalize. And indeed, the Fed tried to do that and then almost immediately turned around and started cutting rates again because they realized, oh crap, we're in a bubble. And if we don't keep cutting interest rates, this thing's going to pop. And all through for the past couple of years, the interest rates have either stayed the same or they've been cut. The Fed officials have come out, no, we're not going to cut interest rates anymore. Oh, sorry, I guess we're going to cut it just one more time because of this or that. And now, as you just pointed out, they're going to zero. We're effectively, I would say, I don't know, 2 weeks, we're going to be in negative interest rates. But as Esso pointed out, the one of the reasons you see that the narrative they're giving can't be true is because it's not like if the economy was doing great, they wouldn't have been cutting interest rates all this time. But
the currency is inflating while marginal GDP is declining. In other words, stagflation.
Mm-hmm. So if anybody else wants to chime in quick.
I mean, we talk about how Trump has been trying to tout the economy and how successful and how great it's been. Yet at the same time, I remember for a period of several months, pretty sure he's still doing this, I'm not 100% sure, he was demanding that the Fed bring the interest rate down to the negatives. Which, I mean, you don't do that unless you have a seriously ailing economy.
Exactly. And what was the most hilarious about it is that if you looked at his Twitter feed, amidst the tweets that say this is the strongest economy in the world, are tweets demanding that the Fed try out negative interest rates because it's working so great in Germany. And obviously, the average unlearned person doesn't understand that, but anyone who understands the Austrian business cycle and basic economics knows that cutting interest rates and going all the way to the point that you want to go to negative is not something you would do if this is the strongest economy in the world.
I just want to say real quick, every time I see Trump or anybody saying this is the strongest economy we have had since, I just roll my eyes at them because, first of all, the dollar's about to collapse and we're over 23 trillion in debt. How can you say for sure? And not only that, there's also still regulations in place. And plus, he keeps replacing Obama's regulations with his own regulations because, if it's under Trump, that must be a good thing. But
they pull the classic Republican switch where they pass a bill advertised as a deregulation.
Oh, of
but
course,
in reality, it removes a limitation which existed on an already existing piece of regulation, which in effect turns it into a subsidy, essentially.
Well, yeah,
like what Reagan did with investment banking in the 80s. For instance.
Yeah, and plus the dollar's about to collapse, as I probably have mentioned already, and yet if that is the case, how can you credibly say that this is the strongest economy we've had?
You cannot.
They're not really. Yeah, they don't have a real case to explain that. They're just listening to what people on Fox News told them, and they're
Sad fact.
They know that it makes Trump look good, and since they think about politics in the terms of whatever they perceive to be something which makes their particular political allegiance look good for the time being, they're going to say it. Not because they actually believe it or because they even have a case to make for arguing that position, just because they know that it normalizes Trump and it makes the Republican Party look good.
Mm-hmm.
Just quick.
I want to make one thing clear. I was not laughing at you, my 2 cents. I was just laughing at the idea that Trump even said that we have the strongest economy that we've ever had. That is.
Oh, I remember BS. I remember like a year ago, you can probably still find this tweet. Mike Pence said that there was zero inflation in the U.S.
Oh my god!
I mean, have they been to a grocery store?
I mean,
I was actually at the grocery store earlier today, and I was actually a little surprised because I live in a rather rural area, and the place was packed with people trying to gather emergency supplies. I was just grocery shopping because I did my prepping already. But anyways, I saw that they had this one big basket of candy that was on sale for like the sale was $1 each for candy bar. I remember back when candy bars like Hershey bars were $1.
Yeah, I remember when they were less than $1. Have you seen those big fucking Hershey bars that like they mainly use for cooking, but they're like a couple pounds?
I've seen them.
Oh god, I love those things.
The ones that weigh like 5 pounds. You mean?
Yeah. Well, I remember when those used to be like $5. There's no way you would get one of those for $5 now.
Nope.
I've actually looked one up on Amazon. It's like about $45.
I'm pretty sure they're 15 actually. I don't know where you got the $45 one.
Look it up on Amazon. Look it up on Amazon.
I'll look it up now actually.
All right. So, anyways, moving the conversation along, like Litigious Society just said, asked in the chat. I'll pull the comment up here. How long until the dollar might collapse?
Well, I don't know, because one of the things that, if you've been watching OPEC recently, and this is something that's kind of seen mainstream attention, is that Saudi Arabia has started dissolving OPEC relations with certain OPEC nations, and that's that's causing some problems for the euro and the US dollar, because for those of you who don't know, you want to explain the process of petrodollar recycling filthy, or should I?
Sure, I'll do it. So the basic idea is that the dollar is worthless. However, in order to maintain a steady supply of the dollar, the United States has created a geopolitical situation where they can expand demand for the dollar around the world artificially. Basically, in order to be able to trade, as in buy or sell oil, you have to maintain a supply of dollars because oil is valued only in US dollars. So say China wants to buy oil from, I don't know, Saudi Arabia, they have to have the dollars from the United States to be able to buy the oil in the first place. And as such, the supply of dollars is spread out. And because it's spread out, the supply is not concentrated in one area, so you have significantly less inflation.
There are two, that's one of the major tools which is propping up the US dollar and the euro. The other one is the IMF, which forces many countries to back their own fiat currencies with a supply of US dollars and euros. And as we know, the OPEC situation is falling apart, essentially. And on top of that, there have been a couple countries. I don't know if you guys saw this, but the Central Bank of Lebanon defaulted recently.
I did, and it has not been reported on any mainstream media outlets, to my knowledge. You have to actually search to find it. But yes, I am aware of that.
It looks like Argentina is about the same thing's about to happen in Argentina and maybe Greece. So you've got a couple of central banks around the world which have more or less functionally defaulted already, and there's not anything like there's no reporting on that whatsoever, even though that basically that basically means their government has no ability to manipulate finance, and as a result it has almost no ability to sustain themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay, so I'm going to quick interject, and because right now, I'm sure those of you who have been watching mainstream media outlets, the narrative they're trying to prop up right now is don't panic. This is not any underlying problem of the economy. This is the coronavirus, and we're going to recover quickly. Now, I would say, obviously, you know, schools are shutting down, businesses are shutting down. People are understandably scared, but we haven't reached, you know, total chaos yet.
Yeah, you know why schools are shutting down though? It's not because of the coronavirus, it's because the student loan market just defaulted.
Yeah.
Exactly. People are starting to default on their debts, and you know, the government's already talking about. Donald Trump has talked about putting a freeze on student loan payments and a number of other, you know, extreme stimulus measures in order to allow American workers to keep going about their daily lives, allow students to keep going about their daily lives. It's basically the same narrative Obama used back in 2008. But I was going to say, I'm just going to say, like, it can go. I think people are going to be amazed how fast the situation will deteriorate. It'll go from a situation of, yeah, this is bad, but not so bad, to in a matter of like 48 hours, looking like complete chaos. Because the Fed. All right, go ahead.
One of the main things which has been stopping me from actually releasing like a quick news video about it, you know, talking about it when people have been asking me to talk about it, aside from the fact that I was sort of insecure over whether or not I actually had a complete narrative for the last week or an accurate picture of what was going on, is just how fucking quickly things are happening.
Okay, absolutely, and I think what to finish the thought I had here. So obviously, the prevalent narrative is that the Fed is like in 2008. The Fed is just going to print up a ton of money. You know, the government's going to hand out a ton of money. They're going to cut back taxes, despite all the panic, despite all the businesses closing, despite all the people defaulting on their loans. Don't worry. The U.S. government is going to give you as much money as you need, and we will keep the economy going. And that is enough to basically pacify people's fears for the time being. What they don't understand, though, and this is something I've talked about in a lot of my videos, is that the health of an economy never had anything to do with the supply of money. It has to do with the amount of goods and services that are available in the economy. If businesses are shutting down, then goods and services are not being produced. And that is exactly what's going on. Truck drivers are not on the roads, so supplies are not getting to the grocery stores. You know, businesses that produce educational facilities, businesses, the people that produce the goods and services that everybody wants are not actually going to work. And as Peter Schiff used this example in one of his podcasts recently, it's like if you've got three fishermen and who provide all the fish for the village, and all three of them stop fishing, but the government says, and just for the simplicity of the example, suppose fish is the only kind of food you've got in this village. All the fishermen stop fishing, but the government says, no problem, we'll give you as much money as you need to buy fish. Well, obviously, when the only kind of food you have is fish, you realize very quickly the government can give you as much money as you want. If there aren't actually any fish to buy, then it doesn't matter how much money the government prints. And I suspect that what's really going to cause the chaos is, despite the government printing all this money, people are going to figure out that the goods and services they want and need are not there. People are going to go to the grocery stores, convinced they have enough money to purchase groceries, and find the shelves empty. Pick whatever good or service you want to talk about. They're going to discover it's not there, or if it is, the price is so astronomically high that all this money they thought they had that would get them everything they need is only going to purchase, you know, a 20th of what it did just a month ago. That is going to be the trigger that's going to make people lose faith, realize that the dollar is fundamentally worthless. They'll abandon it, and I mean, it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I was going to say, is it's not entirely related to the virus or it being more difficult to sell goods. It's just that with all of these loans defaulting and this instability created in the loanable funds market, what you're seeing is suppliers realizing essentially that, we've been operating around these false market signals that nothing that they've been using is real. So what they're realizing more or less is just that they have a bunch of big numbers, but a very small fraction of those numbers represent actual resources, and most of it is just debt.
Maybe a simpler way of stating it, the things people were planning to buy, they're discovering aren't really there, and the things they were planning to sell, they're discovering no one actually wants.
Right, and I've been noticing over the last year, I think that firms have started catching on that this is the case. For instance, if you've gone to a restaurant or you've bought any food, which I can imagine that 99+% of the population have done that in the last year. What you'll notice is that a lot of the sort of mainstream manufacturers, they're increasing prices or keeping prices the same, while the quantities of food for each unit are getting noticeably smaller. Like bags of chips, for instance, contain more air than chips. I think it's like it's more than half the bag, I think, at this point. Subway, for instance, their sandwiches are like half the size that they used to be in terms of width. So just a few examples I could think of off the top of my head.
I think that resonates with everyone.
There's another problem that people, I don't think, are really considering all that much either, and that is going to be the extent to which the government significantly exaggerates the problem. My thinking is that it's not going to be the virus that gets people killed. It's going to be how people respond to the virus, and especially the government. I mean, you have a quarantine. If you quarantine a town, you basically keep everyone in a densely populated area around the other people who could also possibly get the coronavirus. And so as a result, you basically allow it to spread a lot more easily. To say nothing of the fact that you exaggerate the problem of the store shelves being empty, because in a quarantine, nothing gets out, but also nothing gets in. None of the large trucks that help keep the grocery stores supplied are going to be coming in. And that basically exaggerates the problem of scarcity significantly larger. And you're already having some states like Massachusetts, I think, and Michigan have already basically shut themselves down.
Yeah, and more states are following suit every hour.
Yeah.
Here's a question I have.
Go ahead, Night Shift.
Well, here's a question I have. How far are we away from food riots? How far
from food riots? Probably not that far away.
I would say a month.
Yeah, have you seen these videos coming out of supermarkets recently?
Oh, yeah.
Which I can attest, it's not just social media focusing on isolated examples. I went to the store the other day and I saw a lot of this for myself.
I did. I went to the grocery store earlier today and I saw, well, I mean, not all the shelves were bare, but in the paper towel and toilets and the toilet paper aisle, that was basically empty. And there were several spots, particularly in the canned goods area, that were bare.
Yeah, there were no paper towels. There were very few cleaning products. Most of the pet food was gone. There were several shelves which were, usually contained food that were completely empty. So no, John Tron's little meme video he made, that's a pretty accurate representation of what a supermarket is like right now.
I was just grocery shopping and I spent 30 minutes waiting for a checkout.
And around here, at the local Costco, I saw a video. The line for Costco stretched around the building twice and out to the corner just to get inside the store.
God, wow.
Now, bear in mind, another point to bring up, a lot of state governors have enacted, a state of emergency, which part of the regulations that get put in place during a state of emergency is that businesses will be punished for, quote unquote, price gouging individuals in a time of emergency. So in other words, they can't raise the price of the goods on their shelves, even though there's an increased demand. So of course, the reason the shelves are empty is everybody's hoarding, because since the businesses can't raise the price to account for the increased demand, the first come, first serve. Some people, the people who go there first, just grab everything. And within a week now, as more and more people who didn't try to prepare realize they need to restock up on supplies, they'll start going to the stores, find the shelves empty. And even though they've got all this money from the government supplying liquidity, the money they can't buy something that's not there. And that's when you're going to start first hearing of the food riots. And again, I think it's going to be a vague media report, at some obscure location. You got the first one, then another one, but then in a course of, no more than 48 hours, suddenly it's going to be happening everywhere. And everyone's going to be like, what happened?
Okay. And Mag is asking in the comments, what do we do about all this? What can we do about all this? My suggestion is invest in crypto, invest in things like Bitcoin and whatnot. Trying to get at least some of your money into that. And if supermarkets are empty, try and get on some kind of alternative web. Oh God, I don't want to say black market, but like try and find online outlets that sell these things and have them in stock. I mean, what would you guys suggest?
You can find them in your local community, anywhere that you'd find farmers selling goods. That's a great entrance point to the gray market. But just what I was going to say is, I was going to add on to what you were saying, because the economy is collapsing. But keep in mind, this is just the white market and the aspect of the economy that the state controls. The gray market and the black market, it may be affected because there's some overlap. For instance, cryptocurrency prices have slightly dropped because of people trading cryptocurrency stocks. But it's not largely the gray market and the black market are not affected by white market production and finance, because they can't get loans and they can't associate with these state-connected financial institutions. So what is largely going to happen is not, the end of society. It's going to be people starting to set up localized economies and beginning to trade around decentralized apps and cryptocurrencies in order to supply their goods. So what you're going to want to do as soon as possible is to buy as much cryptocurrency and buy as much precious metals as possible, because your assets, if you have anything in like a bank, a credit union, just anything where you prioritize US dollars, is going to get wiped out. It's either going to get seized by the government in a last ditch effort to try and supply the loans that it needs to finance itself, or it's going to end, or you're going to get the value of your dollars stolen, basically through hyperinflation.
You're going to discover that all those dollars you've worked so hard to save are now worth nothing. You go to the store and discover that you can only buy, like I said, a 20th, a 30th of what you could just a year ago.
Suffice to say, the time for preparing, I like to say the time for prepping was yesterday, but actually the time for prepping was last week. If you can get supplies, it might be a good idea too if you haven't already. But yeah, generally the advice of getting precious metals, and now would actually be a perfect time to get crypto because their prices are significantly down to where they were before.
I should note the price of gold and silver did take a dip. Not a massive dip, but it dipped. So if you want to try and get precious metals now, I mean, obviously, I think the time to get them was before now, but I'd say if you don't have any, yes, get some now, because before they start to rocket up in price when the dollar finally collapses.
Oh yes, and try and get out of the city. That's something Filthy and I have been saying for a very long time.
Anywhere with an incredibly high population density is going to become exceptionally dangerous when food riots start.
Yep.
And just to show you how seriously I'm taking it, I'm probably going to be gone offline for the majority of well, not next week, but like the week after, because I'm getting out of the city. So I'm not just preaching this. I'm doing this. I'm actually, we're actually gonna meet up, a few of us, and we're gonna homestead.
All right, now I think another important point to make. It's not like all of this is. It's not that like the government is just going to let all this happen without a fight. They are. They certainly will attempt to institute martial law and other last ditch efforts to save themselves.
There's a district of New York City where they've already done it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. It's not the Bronx, but it's one of the neighborhoods really close to it. Yeah,
Queens?
don't think for a second that's not coming, because they're already doing it.
And I know that Mayor de Blasio has outright said that he wants to nationalize what he considers to be important industries, as though the problem with scarcity is a problem that can be solved with central planning.
You're talking about this as if this is something which they're honestly trying to argue, as if this is an honest something that they believe, and are not just using coronavirus to justify doing something to try and keep the lights on another few minutes.
Oh, I know they're not doing it honestly, but I'm just thinking that there might be someone there's some people in the audience who think that they have honest intentions, and I think it's worth addressing that, at least in mocking terms.
Mm-hmm. Like my opinion, the narrative that the state I could turn out to be wrong about this. I think the narrative that the state's going to start using in the coming months is, of course, it's going to be the same one that they used back in 2008. It's just going to be to a greater extreme. Joe Biden is going to get on TV and say this, economic pandemonium we're going through is the result of capitalism and unregulated free markets. If I'm elected president, I promise to put regulations in place that will ensure that this kind of economic meltdown never occurs again. Of course, but this time they're going to be advocating even more extreme than Dodd-Frank or the kinds that Obama put in place.
I'm honestly kind of curious to see what they're going to say, though, because as I pointed out, they're not going to be able to use that narrative this time, or at least if they use that narrative, everyone will immediately point out, oh, well, you couldn't have stopped this with a fiscal stimulus because GDP was also declining at the same time as the currency was inflating. So what we're going to see is probably something we haven't before, at least in terms of the narrative in mainstream media, because the reason they were able to say that, like, the entire sort of internal reasoning that the protectionists and the interventionists, whatever you want to call them, the mainstream academic economists had for arguing this position is basically that they were suggesting there wasn't enough spending, as if people just weren't trading, that caused the economy to collapse, because there was this rising there was this growth but not enough demand to keep up with the growth. But that's not the case here. We know that's not the case here in advance.
Well, and that kind of leads me into this question. Do all of you see this as just being a depression, or could we literally see a government, could we see a bankruptcy and a government collapse like what the Soviet Union experienced?
There are already several governments which have collapsed, and with how integrated the global finance system is, there's no reason at all to suspect that it's not going to be, it's basically going to be like a domino effect. The first few of these nations, which are sort of at the heel of the IMF and OPEC, they're not major players in it, but they were keeping the system stable at its sort of fundamental foundation, those are going to fall apart. And then the nations, which, it's slowly, one by one, the ones which are more influential are going to start defaulting, and until eventually the entire system collapses.
I like Obeto's comment here. Night Shift,
Yeah,
it's going to be like the
yeah.
Roman Empire. Because everyone talks about the collapse of the Roman Empire, but the truth is the Roman Empire didn't collapse per se. It more faded away. And I feel like that's kind of that's more so what it's going to look like. There won't be a definitive point where, news medias are going to declare the government has fallen.
Yeah.
It's more so there's either the government will fade away or a new government will rise up and take its place, but it won't be any kind of formal handoff. It's going to be kind of a process by which everyone will look backwards in history and say, "Oh, that's what happened."
Yeah,
There
there
was a
was
major paradigm shift.
There was a decade or so after the collapse of the Roman Empire where a lot of the peasants were still under the impression that the Roman Empire existed. You can see this is actually pretty widely documented. So, I mean, that is a pretty accurate description of what's happening. It's something that Kevin Carson actually documented in detail, what he refers to as a hollow state society. And that is when the government doesn't really have a nationalized infrastructure existing. So it doesn't have the ability to consistently enforce its legislative fiat. As a result, you have a society where the state is sort of what exists of it is just openly antagonizing the people that are living in that society, and the people who are living in that society are largely associating simultaneously as if there is still a state, but also since the state is not influencing their behavior to the extent that it was when it was, still stable, they'll, be trading more locally. And I sort of was talking about this earlier.
Well, and I would point out the flip side of that. The danger, of course, would be the rise of an even more totalitarian, dangerous state, as looking at the case of like the Weimar Republic post World War I Germany, in that when they experienced the hyperinflation that they went through and the subsequent economic collapse, that was the catalyst that the Nazis were able to stand up and say, "Look, your government failed you, but give us total control over everything, and we'll never fail you." Enough people fell for it, rallied behind them, and of course, then Adolf Hitler rises to power.
Well, that's probably more than likely what'll happen. It won't be, oh, we're living in a society that's an anarchy. More than likely, the estates which currently exist are going to end up trying to establish new regimes that are sort of like the Weimar Republic. But the problem is that they're not going to be able to establish a monopolized infrastructure because everybody's going to be trading in decentralized counter economies.
That's not to say they won't try, though, because I mean, the Fed has already talked about something called Fed coin, which would essentially be a centralized cryptocurrency.
Hold on. Nate wants to say something.
Go ahead, Nate.
Okay,
Go ahead,
so
buddy.
I've been making this case ever since I became a libertarian, and that is the American empire is going to fall for sure. I didn't know when. I don't know when for sure it was going to happen, but it looks like we are like in very much inches close to it actually happening. I mean, look what happened. Roman Empire, it's gone. British Empire, it's gone. American Empire, it's going to be gone. So if you are saying that, America is going to be fine, I'm sorry, but you're sadly mistaken. It's going to be gone.
No, I agree. And it could be like the Weimar Republic. It could be like Nazism. It could be like the rise of Hitler. The two ways I actually myself see it going down is one, either the balkanization of the Americas, of North America and Latin America, to where we go from these large super governments like the United States, Canada, Mexico, to a bunch of smaller more microized states.
Mhm.
Or on this might happen too. I'm not saying it will, but this might happen too. People might actually accept anarchism, and we might see a rise of anarchism. Those two seem to be the most realistic. But yes, we could indeed see what we saw with the fall of the Weimar Republic and the rise of Hitler, which would be the worst case scenario all around, especially if that was from the United States of America. But I don't know. It just seems like the more realistic ones are either the balkanization of North America with a bunch of smaller states taking over, or potentially we could see anarchy rise.
Well,
I have a
I
different
fundamentally I disagree with either the idea that there are going to be new states which form and the idea that anarchy will be accepted and that will result in the emergence of a stateless society. I think more than likely new states won't form because you'll have all these decentralized networks which everyone does all their associations through, conduct all their business through. So it would be more like a state can't come along and threaten people. They can come along and threaten people, but it'll be like that cyanide and happiness meme. Police says, "Give me your crypto." The other guy says, "What crypto?" And then the next frame is them not saying anything to each other and
Yeah,
nothing.
I'm going to give it back to Nate quick. He said he
Yeah,
wasn't
all
finished.
right.
Okay, so I was going to continue through my last point, and that is we've been maintaining an empire in like 150, 160 plus countries, plus Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, welfare. All of that is all bankrupt. All of it. It's all going to go away. If you think it's not going to go away and you think it's strong and you think you keep saying, oh, we can reform it. Oh, well, it would be a bit more solid if we just pay more taxes to it. No, it's all going to go away. Doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how you reform it, whatever. It's all going to be gone. It's all going to be gone. Okay? So, yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say.
The way that these states are going to recongregate themselves and the way that Nazi Germany rose at the end of the Weimar Republic, I mean, the Nazi Party didn't come from nowhere. They got funding from central bankers like the Rothschilds. And it's the same thing with the American Revolution and that sort of thing. The difference is that this isn't just the collapse of the government. This is the collapse of central banking as an institution that could do anything. So, sure, you might have some organizations that attempt to congregate around themselves and try to create an appeal to the people that we are the strong men. We are the strongman party, and we are going to fix everything we promise. And really all they're doing is just like a bunch of thugs that go around threatening people.
Yeah, if they don't have their monopoly on finance and their monopoly on arbitration, their monopoly on security, it really doesn't matter what they say because we can just ignore them and there's not really a whole lot they can do about it, which is why I'm incredibly skeptical of the idea that new states are going to be able to form in this post-central banking area, this post-central bank era we're entering into.
I remember this.
I hope myself that's the way it goes, honestly.
I remember in Mass Effect 2, in one of the areas on the Omega station, there's just like this one alien who's standing on this doing a soapbox speech about how humanity is a blight, and really like he sounds like someone with absolutely genocidal intent, but he is completely irrelevant throughout the entire game, other than just a set piece. And I think that's what governments are going to be following. Well, what's coming?
Well, and even if we want to go into that, that plot in Mass Effect 2, they were blaming the humans for that because the only other species that could possibly pull anything like that off in the game was the Vorcha, and they were pretty much idiots, but it turned out it actually was the Vorcha. And so it really is kind of like, you gotta, it doesn't matter what people are saying on their damn soapboxes. You got to look for the facts. You got to continue to look for the facts, and you've got to be very anal in looking for, the truth, because I mean, people are going to be spouting off, and it's not going to be honest, and you've got to look for the truth in that.
I just remembered something that I want to point out real quick, and this has been discussed on my this has been discussed on my show when I had the base Pluto on. I gotta mention this. This is one of the best moments of my show, by the way. Pluto pointed out that people keep saying that most of our money are being spent on the military, but in actuality, most of our money is actually being spent on welfare. He shows us all these graphs, and he's like, "Oh, would you look at that? Oh my goodness, military! It's only a little bit. But look at welfare. Oh my gosh!"
It's like, I remember back when the military comprised 20% of the budget. What's it like at 10% now?
Somewhere around there, yeah. What?
No, it's below 10%. It's below that. Welfare's really eating it all up.
I mean, you got Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. That's easily like 75, 80% of the budget, and that's all non-discretionary spending. There has to be a deliberate act of Congress signed by the president into law to be able to stop that money from being spent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I was going to say is that's not because the military budget's decreased. In fact, since
it hasn't.
Since about 2008, it's tripled, I think.
Yeah, I mean, though it does make up a large chunk of the spending. However, it is still not as much. It doesn't even come close to how much there is welfare spending. I mean, all the the other stuff, education, energy, all that stuff. That's like all the little itty bitty stuff that they're wasting our money on.
And the thing with welfare, which a lot of people almost never bring up, is that functionally it serves as a and this is a great one to throw at your, the progressives when you're debating with them, that functionally welfare serves as a subsidy to white market firms. And the reason why that's the case is because it creates a larger disconnect between the marginal product of each individual worker and what the firm's ability to evaluate said marginal product. So in a sense, it creates less of an incentive for the firms to take into consideration each individual worker, because each worker has less leverage over the firm, and each worker is, I guess, a very simple way of putting it would be less valuable because of that.
Yeah, and it's funny. I always have people telling me you should sign up for Social Security, welfare, unemployment benefits, food stamps, all that. And my answer to that every time they ask me is no. Because here's if the government is about to if the dollar is about to collapse, whatever, and the government may potentially collapse, I don't want to be a part of that. I could get greatly affected by it.
But the reason that I bring that up, though, is because, in a sense, that means that the overwhelming majority of government spending, even aside from, if you want to take into consideration the fact that inflation and all these loans technically function as a tax, but they're not documented as taxes. The fact of the matter is the overwhelming majority at this point, the amount of the budget which is going specifically to trying to prop up the white market and to try and sustain the political economy has ballooned in the last decade. Just the last decade.
Yeah. I don't, if it's okay, 2 cents. There's like a comment that just caught my eye in the live chat.
Go ahead. I'll pull it up on the screen. Which one?
Alex G.
Oh, Alex G.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I wanted to address that myself.
Okay, and let me just say this real quick. Christian, I'm a Christian here, and let me just say, Well, you don't know for sure. All right, we've had issues like this before. It's a never-ending cycle that has happened before. So you can't know that. We don't know that for sure. Okay.
People
So
people
I'm
thought
not.
people thought World War One, World War Two were the end times, and you go back, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure you could find
Yeah.
people who could say that the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, I don't know, we can probably pick any war, that those were the end times. And the
And
fact of the matter
everybody-
is, like, there is so much misconception about what the Antichrist is. It's actually makes me cringe every time. According to the Bible, the Antichrist is literally anyone who denies that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. So not only does the Antichrist live today, there are literally billions of them, and there are probably going to be more in the future.
And there's something I just want to mention real quick. I will not discuss this here on the street because it'll take up too much time. But I'm actually going to do a future episode about the hypocrisy of so-called conservatives with the Antichrist, because for 8 years we keep hearing from them that Obama was the Antichrist, and yet now that Trump is president, they're not. They're talking about how wonderful he is.
Oh,
How
just
wonderful
in response,
Obama is?
No. They were talking about how Obama was the Antichrist for 8 years, and now that Trump is president, they're talking about how wonderful Trump is.
Yeah,
You're
and
basically
I
doing the
remember those same
thing.
people were saying that Obama was going to stage a military coup to stay in office and declare himself dictator for life.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, Obama is no different from Trump or Bush or Clinton or Bush or any other president that you can think of. Okay,
just that
it's
the
all-
government has scaled, and in terms of what it needs to sustain itself and the amount of debt that it's in since Obama's left.
Yeah, sure.
I want to say thank you
That's what I've
quick.
been trying. Sorry, continue.
Okay, T-He, thank you for your super chat. The U.S. dropped 1.5 trillion taxpayer dollars to boost the Dow by 2,000 points to save their corporate interests.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that was a single. That was in a single day. And for context, the entire stimulus of the 2008 bailout was $800 billion. So in one day, they just created a loan that was double the bailout for the 2008 financial crisis. Not only that, but throughout the last year, on a weekly basis, there's like a week every month where the Fed was creating $90 billion loans every day, and recently those loans have gotten as big as $120 billion a day for like a week. So I haven't even really been counting how many loans have been created over the last year, but it fucking dwarfs the bailout of the 2008 financial crisis.
And as you can see with what I've shared in my screen here, Esso is absolutely right. It dwarfs 2008. And yet Donald Trump, the person who so vehemently criticized Obama for doing just that, is demanding more Fed action.
Well, I mean, it's what I've been talking about with other people, both online and in real life, that I remember Glenn Beck, actually, back when I was a conservative, telling a story about when he met George W. Bush in office, like towards the tail end of his presidency, when Obama had already been elected, but before his inauguration. He was basically, Glenn Beck asked, well, aren't you concerned about what Obama might do to this country? And George Bush just laughed and said, listen, he's going to be met with the same challenges. He's going to be talking to the same advisors. The same legislation is going to apply to him, and he's going to be facing the same exact pressures. As far as I'm concerned, he's going to do basically the same thing I'm going to be doing, and so is every other president.
You should find that interview, because that'd be actually pretty telling to use, really.
Before we keep going, I got to say thank you to Zachary Colley for your super chat. He's noted he is of the preterist persuasion, which within Christianity would be interprets prophecies in light of many of the prophecies in Revelation. They believe already took place with the collapse of with the destruction of the temple in 70 AD and the Roman Empire. But I'm not going to say too much on that. We'll keep moving.
All right. So as I was saying, as far as I can tell, that interview was not televised, And this came from a story that Glenn Beck shared on his radio show. I doubt I would ever be able to find that clip again. So this is entirely secondhand. But I've been telling people about this, that you might be a burnout, you might be a Elizabeth Warren supporter, you might support Trump, but fundamentally, don't be dazzled by the partyarchy. They're all basically doing the same thing, and they're going to be doing the same thing. They're all going to be faced with the same incentives. They're going to be given the same information. And sure, one of them is going to do something slightly different because, as SO has pointed out numerous times, there's no universal way to not quite what I was going at. What I was getting at is that the way that each individual president is going to interpret the information is going to be different, but fundamentally they're going to basically be doing the same thing. They're all going to act in ways that further the size and power of the state.
Yeah, that point you just made is valid as well, but it's also because what the state needs to do to continue functioning is going to change per administration.
Mm-hmm.
So even if they have the same interpretation of what they're going to do, how they're going to behave is going to be entirely different.
Okay. All right. We're coming up on about an hour now. So just I'll quick put it out there. Anybody in the comments section, if there's something we haven't addressed at all that you'd like us to talk about, now's the time to make a comment.
I know I'm not in the comments, but yeah, we almost didn't even say anything about the coronavirus and its origins itself.
Okay. Filthy, I believe you're the one who's most spooled up on that, correct?
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, I figured that you'd have read some of that material a bit more closely than I admittedly did. I know sort of the basic gist of it, but I didn't.
I mean, from what I know, there's a lot of conflicting information in terms of where the virus came from. Some say it's a Chinese worker, or rather a Chinese supervisor in a level 4 lab in Canada that traveled to Wuhan. Some say that it originated in Wuhan entirely. Some suggest that it was a botched project to create a bioweapon that somehow got loose, which, if you know how level 4 labs work, would basically constitute treason.
Yeah, we best not make any specific claims, I guess, but there's a lot of evidence which at least we have in particular, which suggests that the coronavirus was a manufactured bioweapon. For instance, the fact that the sort of genetic makeup of the virus is a combination of two different diseases. I believe it's SARS and mumps that does occur in nature.
You have SARS and mumps, and you also observed several protein structures in the virus that are identical to HIV. So you have a combination of 3 different diseases that do not combine in nature. It literally is not possible. So we know with absolute certainty that this was created. Now,
it was created through gene splicing. That's what we know for sure.
Yeah, now why was it created? Was it a bioweapon? Was it done for research purposes to try to figure out how, I don't know, HIV reacts to or how a certain HIV protein reacts to one thing or another? I don't know, and there's not enough information to make a definitive statement one way or another. But as SO said, it was definitely created through gene splicing. That's not even a question.
And this was reported by Zero Hedge, which resulted in Zero Hedge's suspension on Twitter.
Yep, you can't even actually. Everyone who's said anything about it through social media has been banned, and the fact they were banned was memory hold very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's few outlets that did talk about it, claimed that they're spreading Russian disinformation. Well,
I remember.
I don't know how it can be disinformation. You have the genetic makeup of the disease.
I was telling someone about the HIV protein, and I was a conspiracy theorist. I didn't even say anything about a conspiracy. I just said that, look, this is an HIV protein on a thing that shouldn't have an HIV protein. What's so difficult about that? What's the conspiracy?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I was going to add is that there are a couple other fishy things about it. First of all, there was a lab created in the Wuhan province capital around the start of 2019, so about the time that the Fed started creating all these crazy loans. That's just anecdotal, but I think that it's very interesting timing. But yeah, there was a lab created there to experiment with macrobiology and cells. That's officially what the Chinese government said. And recently, the narrative was covered in our media that there were Chinese spies in Harvard, but basically, the U.S. government through Harvard and through this project was funding that specific lab in China. Now, they could claim that they were Chinese spies, but that does not dismiss the fact that they were being directly funded by the U.S. government. So there are strong indications to suggest not only that the coronavirus is a manufactured disease, specifically it's a product of gene splicing, but also that it was created as a result of a partnership between the U.S. and Chinese governments. Now, and this is also substantiated by the fact that the U.S. government, if we were to take their their narrative at face value, that they're trying to they're just quarantining everything and they're just nationalizing all these industries and they're just shutting everything down, not because loans are collapsing, not because that's something they perceive to be necessary in order to try and sustain the political economy. No, it's more because this disease, this disease came out of nowhere. Well, the problems with that are that the FDA is actively shutting down private labs which try to experiment with the coronavirus and have tried to make cures. I can send you an article on that 2 cents that I'll pull up right away.
Okay, awesome. And I see a lot of people in the comment section are asking for sourcing. So if you'd like to send it to me, I'll go ahead and post them in the description for the video.
I just wanted you to pull this one up particular, but everything that I'm saying, I have sources to prove it. And, 2 cents can go ahead and pin them in the pinned comment. And, when I re-upload this, which I was planning on doing, I'll certainly do the same.
Okay. Well, on that note, I'm just going to point out, I obviously have not looked at any of those sources, so I can't comment on any of that. What I can say is that in all this, the economic collapse that's coming and that's being blamed on the coronavirus, here's kind of an analogy that I feel works really well to how it relates to the economic collapse. Whenever you have a really bad forest fire, you can say people can investigate and they can determine that Jack and Jill were camping one night and they forgot to put out their campfire. So it is Jack and Jill's, this massive forest fire that destroyed the entire city is 100% the fault of Jack and Jill. If Jack and Jill hadn't lit their campfire, the forest wouldn't have gone up in a blaze and the town wouldn't have been destroyed. Now, there's a sense in which you can say that's true, but if you know anything about forest fires, what you know is that how bad a forest fire is dependent on the health of the forest. If the forest is healthy, then a single campfire should not be able to set the whole thing ablaze. If the forest is unhealthy, then if not that campfire, it would have been something else. As soon as the forest gets unhealthy enough, it's only a matter of time before some spark sets the whole thing ablaze. So if coronavirus is the straw that broke the camel's back, the pin that popped the bubble, whatever term you want to use, fine. The point is the economy was in a bubble and it was going to collapse. The government needed something to place an excuse on, and coronavirus works very conveniently, just like you might try to blame Jack and Jill for burning down the entire city, even though if it wasn't Jack and Jill, it would have been something else.
Now, so far, what I've presented is just convenient timing, but I actually do have something which is a slam dunk, essentially, kind of proves it, which is the fact that bills being passed now under the guise of coronavirus prevention measures, many of them were actually authored over a year ago. For instance, there was this new vaccine law, and yes, of course, I'm going to link this to you, 2 cents, but there was this new vaccine law which was passed recently that was actually authored. They're passing it under the guise of being a preventative measure for the coronavirus, but in fact, the bill was authored in September of last year. So this existed before the coronavirus pandemic. And another pretty damning one is this bill that was passed recently where they're in some cities now they're starting to seize guns and ammo under the guise of coronavirus prevention measures, which doesn't even make sense.
All right. Well, we have gone past the hour now, so if anybody has any closing thoughts, I'll give you a chance to quick say them, but then we're going to cut this stream off.
I mean, it seems, as for all this is the last thing I'm going to say, and this is sort of my closing statement, which is, we've seen in the media that there is this very strong push to suggest that everything the government is doing right now is in response to the coronavirus. But it seems that there's more evidence and a more likely, a more likely explanation to support the claim that this is actually in response to a total collapse of the political economy, and the coronavirus was manufactured so that when that eventually happened, the government could point to the coronavirus as a justification for its actions so that its actions didn't initially appear to be completely malevolent.
All right. Anybody else?
Basically, all I want to say is everybody take care and do try your best to be calm and encourage people around you to be calm. Government preys on fear, and if you're afraid, if you have anxiety, then you're going to be more readily willing to accept when the government swoops in, pretends to be the savior to solve all your problems. So just remember that your liberty,
problems that it created, by the way.
You're probably going to miss a lot of things that you're probably going to miss a lot of things that it does as well. So even when taking preventative measures, you're going to not evaluate information correctly because you'll be panicking.
Just think about it this way. The difference between your being free and your being a slave is going to depend on whether or not you're able to remain calm at this moment.
Mm-hmm. One thing I wanted to close out with is that it really surprises me that that the Epstein didn't kill himself meme. Mm-hmm. It really surprises me that we haven't seen a coronavirus was manufactured meme kind of replace that.
Mm-hmm. Right, Nate, you got something?
All I can say is this is another example of why everybody should stay away from the mainstream media, because their intention is to create fear and to create chaos. And I just love how people love to say that we anarchists want to bring about chaos, but truth is, the state just is equal. Sorry for stumbling. But basically, this whole situation further proves my point that the state is chaos. That's all I have to say.
The
All
state
right.
is
Well,
chaos.
Thanks everybody for tuning into the stream. Again, I will reiterate as well. Do not panic. The time for preparing, as Filthy said, was yesterday, but it's never too late to do what we can't change what's whatever you have or have not done up to this point can't be changed. What's important is what you do next. So
One last thing that I wanted to say, there are communities of biohackers which you can easily find online who have gotten together a couple CRISPR kits, and they're starting to experiment themselves with trying to create a cure for coronavirus, which I just want to say, like, how absolutely fucking hilarious it'll be if a bunch of agorists end up curing the coronavirus.
If they do, we can guarantee that you will not be allowed to have it. They will make it illegal.
Zachary Colley, thank you for your super chat. So I'm going to end on this. Corey's life matters. and that is my 2 cents. Y'all can take it for what it's worth.